I wanted to really take advantage of the dynamics.
Yeah.
I knew I wanted to have the big parts be really big and really aggressive, just in your face.
Yep.
Like right in the intro. First you get slapped in the face, and then you get shoved, and then you get punched.
Did anyone come in and say, wait, you're Andy Wallace?
Yes, they look at me, and I know what they're thinking. Like, an old fart like you is doing these heavy, heavy records. Just say, yeah, well, I am. I haven't listened to it for a long time, and it sounds great, if I say so myself.
Yeah.
You want aggressive? Here it is. Obviously, that's what I was going for, and I was just spellbound by grace. I looked at this man, and I said, did he write that? He said, yeah. I said, oh, boy, I can't wait to get in the studio on that one. It certainly had a heavy feel, but it also was melodic in a really cool way. I always like to have the artist's input as well.
Yeah.
Because it's their record, it's not my record. Their input is what makes it their record. There's no perfect mix, you know. There's different mixes, and there's good mixes, but there's no perfect mix. I always think of it as making a statement, like, right, you know, and you're going to listen to this for a minute, but I want you to get the feeling that this guitar just came in and took over your life. There's place in music for all of it.
Is it balance? Is it tone? I mean,
it's all of that, yeah. And instinct, you know. I can't really put a name on it other than that. It's the same thing that happens in anything that I mix or produce, whether it's Jeff Buckley or Slayer, you know. The same mindset is happening, just with different tools and sometimes with different objectives. That's something I think you learn with experience, is when to say, that's enough. You can't have everything in there at once. You lose the special, unique quality that you're looking for.
As you can see, Andy Wallace has worked on some of the most important records of all time. His name has been on the back of albums for decades, and I've seen it, and I've looked for interviews with him, and there are none. I know nothing about him. He never does interviews. When I started my channel, I was like, I need to get Andy Wallace. I need to interview him. And I've reached out to him so many times. And finally, I heard back from him. And he's like, yeah, let's do it. So we went to East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, to a studio that he was working at. And I got to ask him all these questions. I literally know nothing about the guy. You see him on these famous records. His mixes are insanely great. He produced Jeff Buckley Grace, which is one of my favorite records and one of the most important records of ever. And this is my chance to get to hear his backstory. I hope you enjoy this as much as I did. Andy, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here, Rick.
It's such an honor to meet you.
I feel the same way.
So I don't know anything about you, honestly. I've seen you, your name on records for decades now. I don't know anything about your background, and you don't really do a lot of interviews. You really don't do any interviews, pretty much.
Pretty much.
And tell me about yourself, where you grew up, how you got into music.
Okay, sure. Well, I grew up in Clifton, New Jersey.
Okay.
One of four kids, the youngest of four kids. My parents were from the Midwest. My dad was a physician. He got an internship at St. Mary's Hospital in Passaic, and that's how they ended up in Clifton. I've always loved music since, as long as I can remember. And I studied classical piano with a really nice teacher who was very good and also a nice guy. In grade school, from probably 3rd grade to 8th grade, and still enjoy playing the piano.
Okay.
I don't get to do it as much as I want, but I have made 1 or 2 appearances on records, which I'll get to, I guess, a little bit later. I also, at the same time, was always intrigued in mechanical devices. And so I don't know where I saw it. It was probably in a museum that I saw an Edison cylinder phonograph.
Okay.
And it was explained to me what it was. And I thought, like, wow, that's, absolutely incredible. Plus, I had learned a little bit about Edison at that point anyway. And I was still quite young. I was still, middle of grade school, maybe, I don't know how old, 8 years old or something like that. So I remember, I was intrigued with Edison anyway. Because, what an incredible guy, an inventor, right. That still has huge effect on today.
Yeah,
what we do
absolutely.
Today, such as recorded music.
Yes.
And I remember for some, I don't know, it wasn't a science project. I don't know what kind of project it was, but in grade school, I actually made I took a toilet paper roll, wrapped it in tinfoil, and made a box and made a little my little version of the cylinder. I don't have any photos of it. I wish I did, but I don't. As I think I mentioned it before, I've collected cylinders and I still love them. I play them for my grandkids every now and then. I say, hey, check this out, and they're always like, oh. And anyway, so I've always loved music like that, and all different types of music too. I remember as a kid, my family used to visit. I guess it was a college friend of my mother's, lived out on Long Island, and we'd always have Thanksgiving every year out at their house. And up in their attic, I wasn't poking around in the attic unbidden, but somehow I got into a conversation about phonographs, and they said, "Oh, we have an old wind-up phonograph up in the attic." So I said, "Oh, great." Well, they did, and they had all these records, and some of them were vintage from the 20s and such, but some were newer, but 78s. Mm-hmm. And I remember, I was just playing them and listening. Everybody else was downstairs, enjoying Thanksgiving, and I was upstairs playing these records. And one of the ones that just really caught my ear was a Dixieland record by the Firehouse 5+2. And I was just, I said, wow, because I hadn't really heard, at least wasn't aware of Dixieland by the time.
So would this be in the 50s
yes.
or so? In the 50s,
yes.
okay.
Yep. Yeah, I was born in 47, so this would be, mid-50s sometime. Okay. One of their older sons, they had older kids, had a Model T Ford, by the way, too, which I got a ride in. I was like, this is pretty cool. But getting back to that, so anyway, I've had a lifelong love of Dixieland. And then I discovered Firehouse 5+2 were members that were all Disney animators. So how cool is that?
That's amazing.
So yeah. But they're an excellent band. But anyway, so I started collecting old records and phonographs. And at that point, people weren't really holding on to them so much. And so a lot of them I got for free by people who were going to throw them out.
Okay.
Somehow I'd learn about it and say, oh, I'll take it, including some of these big Victrolas, everything like that. My parents must have been really screwy or very permissive, one or the other. And my dad had a lot of records. He had a big collection of classical, these 18-inch, I guess they were, discs, phonograph records.
Yeah.
And so we always had some kind of music playing in the house. So I would get these boxes of records that people were going to throw out, and there were a lot of, vaudeville acts from the 20s and all different types of music, a lot of band music, like brass band music and things. Another milestone was my dad was a ham radio operator.
Okay.
And so I had the pleasure, he had his thing set up in the basement, a big tower in the backyard, which I used to climb, and my mom would go like, get off there. And I got to talk to people all over the world.
Wow.
As a kid.
Yeah.
And it was really exciting. But one of the things he had that I was actually getting to was he had a wire recorder, an old Webcore wire recorder. And, I just thought that was magic. Not only could I listen, but now I could actually record, So I immediately started doing all sorts of crazy things. I learned how to edit wire tape. You know how you edit wire tape?
How do you edit wire tape?
You tie a knot in it.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so you can't really do very precise editing, unless you're really clever. But and then I was actually able to spool the wire around, even though the take-up reel was very different than the other one. But I, of course, clowning around, managed to figure out a way to play it backwards and could do that. So I heard all this, and it was, I just had fun with it,
Did you record any music with it?
I
or
didn't.
anything?
No, I never,
Okay.
because at that time I was just basically, playing piano.
Okay.
And so I didn't really ever record music on it. I just kind of played around with it.
Was there rock music just starting to happen at this time period?
Yes. Bill Haley and the Comets and a lot of R&B.
Yeah.
I've always been a big R&B fan of all the different, genres of R&B. And I still am. It's still one of my favorite styles of music. So, I bought a lot of 45s when I was a kid.
Okay.
And then, of course, there were the Everly Brothers, in the late 50s. And that really caught my ear because I like harmony. I'm a singer as well. Mm-hmm. And you wouldn't know it listening to my voice right now. And I love, the rhythm. And Bo Diddley. When I first heard Bo Diddley, da, 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 I thought, wow, that's so cool. It's so simple, It just evolved into, a lifelong passion for music and recording, And then I remember that he got a Wallensack quarter-inch tape recorder at some point, a little bit later. And so then I actually found I could edit accurately and started playing around with that. And it's funny because over the years, when I've been working in studios, I did lots of these club records, where you'd record all segments and then edit them together. I actually got really good at it, and I could time shift not only backward through a delay line, but then flip the tape over. I'd measure it. I'd run the whole track through a delay line except to the other and get it. So, okay, 33 milliseconds. Flip the tape over and run the track through that. And then I was synchronized. So I had all these tricks, I'm not unique, but I was very good at them. I could do it really quickly. Get the tape synced up if I had to fly in background vocals into a multi-track thing from a 2-track.
Yeah. Long before you had things to do that digitally.
Yeah, way before Pro Tools. Way before Pro Tools. And so I got really good at that. And I sort of feel like I got robbed, when Pro Tools came along, because I had all this skill set that nobody uses anymore, including myself.
Right.
So, I think, well, that's all right. I got other skills.
Before we go any further, I want to quickly interject that 57% of you watching right now are not subscribed to my channel. So please hit the subscribe button now. Thanks.
When I went to college, I guess it was when I was in early college, I kind of discovered the acoustic guitar.
Okay.
And
what year did you go to college?
I went to college in 64.
Okay,
1964.
So the Beatles had just come out?
Yeah, the Beatles had just come out. That's right.
Yeah.
Yep. And of course, like everybody else in the world, I was like, I love it.
You went to Notre Dame?
Went to Notre Dame, University of Notre Dame. Yep. I majored in chemical engineering, by the way.
Okay. Wow.
I spent 6 years there. I have over 200 degrees, 200 credits, but no degree.
Okay.
So again, very patient parents.
Right.
Because they paid the tuition. Anyway, so I played in early college, not at Notre Dame. I mean, I was at Notre Dame, but in the summers, I played with a very longtime friend of mine. His mother and my mother were friends, and I got to know him. And he had a neighbor. They both played guitar and sang. They were into folk music and such. And his immediate neighbor. And then they had another school friend who played the banjo. So we formed a quartet called the Congress of Vienna was the name of the quartet.
Okay.
And, we weren't too bad. I don't have any existing recordings. We did do a recording once at somebody's house, and we were well prepared. But we did mostly folk covers. We did a couple Beatle tunes, and we weren't too bad. We played I forget what it was near, maybe the Cafe Wa or someplace down the village. We played there once, and we played at a workshop. We weren't really on the main thing up at Newport Folk Festival.
Wow.
So to which we drove in a 1930 Model A Ford Roadster, 4 of us with our instruments, 2 in the rumble seat with their instruments in their lap. Oh my God, crazy. So, but anyway, so I did music with them for a while.
Okay.
And that's when I really started focusing on singing, Not that I never sang before, but I never did it in the context of a musical group. And then I was busy trying to be a chemical engineer. And at some point, I forget what year it was, maybe the 3rd year or 4th year, we did what they called a plant trip, where you go out and visit industrial sites, where chemical engineers work. So you kind of see what it's like. And I just remember going like, I don't think so.
Right.
I don't think that's right for me. I wasn't opposed to the whole thing. It was fine. But I said, you know what? This isn't going to work for me. And by that time, I also took more piano lessons in college from a nice instructor as well. And I met an excellent guitarist by the name of Norm Zeller, who's, again, one of the greatest guitarists I've ever worked with. He probably is the best guitarist I've ever worked with. I met him at a party that another student had his family lived in South Bend, and they had like a little, I don't know what you call it, a little bungalow off on their property. So he had a party there, and I met Norm there, and we really hit it off, About the same time, I was listening to Sting, playing bass and all this sort of thing. But anyway, I remember it was a Strange Brew by
Cream.
Cream, of course.
Yeah.
Right. And there was something about the simplicity of the bass line that really made me want to play bass, you know. So I got myself a bass, an old Gibson solid body. I got it for, I don't know, $100 or something like that, out in South Bend at the local music store. And so I started, you know, playing bass, and then I met Norm. I guess it was around 1967 maybe or so. He and other students at Notre Dame had put together a band. They had really just about formed. I guess it must have been around 68. And the fella, Jack Prendergast, who was also a phenomenal musician, he was the bass player in the band. And he was at the time, a very free-spirited guy. And not that he isn't anymore, but he was kind of a wild child, but an excellent musician. So he got an offer to play in the Illinois State Jazz Band, was doing a European tour. And they drafted certain musicians, even though they weren't from the University of Illinois. And so he was asked to play tuba in that band. And off he went to on this European tour. Never really made any arrangements with the band. So now the band says, like, we got some gigs, you know. So I don't know exactly how it came about, but somehow I ended up playing in the band, bass. At the time, there was just one singer. He was a lead singer. And when they realized I could sing, and I was pretty good at singing harmonies, you know, I got that Everly Brothers thing going on in my head. So that worked for First Friday as well.
Here's a short clip of Andy's band First Friday from their new record. This is one of Andy's songs. Check it out.
Soon as the smile, better go and find another person who can love you, who can love you. I don't know. Soon as the smile, better go and find another person who can love you, who can love you. I don't know.
In 1969, we did an album in 1969, and on a little indie label.
Wait, was this your first time in a recording studio then?
No, I'll tell you about my first time in a recording studio, but it was my first time working in a recording studio.
Okay.
And it was a little 4-track studio in Pekin, Illinois. And the owner-operator is Jerry Milam, and he was great. He was, you know, I really learned a lot from him. He actually offered me a job, and I worked with him after I graduated, and I worked in the studio for about probably 9 months, basically as a chief cook and bottle washer.
Okay.
But I learned a whole lot, and I heard a whole lot. I mean, I heard an incredible steel guitar player there on a country session, and during warm-ups, he's playing jazz licks on a pedal steel.
Incredibly hard to do.
Yeah, and he was nailing it. So we rehearsed the summer before that, which I think was the Woodstock summer, if I'm not mistaken, of '69, right?
Yeah.
And so we didn't go to Woodstock. We went to somebody's house in Pennsylvania and rehearsed.
Your own Woodstock.
Our own Woodstock. It was plastic stock. But I'm a songwriter as well. And I had written a couple songs that, you know, everybody liked, and we were going to put them on the record. So we did that, and we recorded, and, you know, I played bass on some songs and keyboard on some songs, and Jack, you know, did the same. We kind of switched around, and we still do. I don't play keyboard in the band so much anymore. But anyway, the big turnaround point with Jack was, he looked at me one day, we were talking or something like that, and he said, "You're actually a pretty good songwriter." You know, and that was like, oh, be still my heart. So, we you know, in short order became very fast friends and such, you know, and still remain so. And so that was the birth of First Friday. We did the album in late '69, I think September or something like that. And copies, we only printed up 500 vinyl copies. That was
How much would that cost back then, Andy, to print up 500 copies?
Oh, geez, I don't even remember. Not too much.
Okay.
It wasn't too much. You know, we couldn't afford much. I honestly don't remember what it was. And they sold, they were for sale, among other things, they were for sale in the Notre Dame bookstore.
Okay.
They had a little section with records, and they put us in there.
Nice.
With them. I recently found a copy. I wasn't even looking for it in Europe, someplace where it was in Portugal, I guess. We went someplace, and there was a record, like a classic record store.
So you found one of your records from back then in Portugal.
Yes, that's right. I happened to go in there, and I was talking with the salesperson, and somehow it came up that I guess whoever I was with saying, you know, well, he's a musician and he makes records or something like that. and because we were there with some friends. And she said, "Oh, well, let me, who are you?" I said, "Oh, I'm Andy Wallace." And she said, "Wait a minute." So she got the owner and a copy of the record, and they took a picture of us outside. If you ever need it, I can give you a picture of us standing outside with the First Friday album. But anyway, and that was only a few years ago. But what I was going to say is that album, I myself only have, I think, 2 copies of it. I have one that's still in saran wrap, or not saran wrap, but whatever that wrap is. And the other one is my copy, But copies have sold for many hundreds of dollars on the internet.
Okay.
Somehow it got really popular in Japan for a while. And I think I heard as high as like $700 or something for this crazy album. And I'm proud of the album. It's we did a good job, I think. But anyway, so
Andy, I'm trying to figure out how you go from this to being in studio. We're starting to work in studios. So you had that experience recording on a 4-track there,
right?
When you recorded that, were you thinking, "Oh, I kind of like recording. Oh, this is interesting."
Oh yeah. Well, let me back up a little bit and tell you the first time I was in a recording studio. The same friend of mine that put together the Congress of Vienna, my mom's school friend's son, Tom Queso was his name. He had another friend whose sister was a secretary at Columbia Records for, I want to say Charlie Colello. She was asked by her boss to put together a small audience to be in the control room during the recording of a Tony Bennett album.
What?
With full orchestra
Oh my God.
and background vocals. So I said, count me
there.
in,
right?
And so there I was with maybe 8 or 9 other people in the control room. On the other side of the glass is a full orchestra, background vocals, strings, the whole works, and Tony Bennett.
Oh my God.
He had come in and introduced himself to everybody. And I was like, and it must have, I don't even remember, but it must have been an 8-track machine, I would think.
You must have been looking around at all the gear.
I was, well, first of all, I was impressed just by the sound of it.
Yeah.
Because the orchestra's out there playing. It's the whole thing,
Yeah.
And it's coming out of these monitors just sounding big
Amazing.
and gorgeous,
Right.
and just incredible, So I was in awe of that. But yes, I'm looking around at all this stuff, and it must have been an 8-track recorder. I honestly don't recall exactly, but it probably was. And then I was equally amazed when Tony Bennett came back into the control room and they played it back, and it sounded just as good. It sounded identical. And I'm going like, holy cow, I think that was the first time that I really thought, and of course by this time I had already been playing around with recorders, but not recording music. And I think that was what really planted the seed big time, it wasn't like I'm going to do this as a living, but it certainly made me realize that this is something you can do that I could do, And then the second experience was this album with First Friday, and then being invited to work in the studio afterwards, because I was 2 years older than the rest of the band.
Okay.
And, but I had these 2 extra years in school. I should have graduated in '68, but the whole band basically left school, Notre Dame, in, I guess, 1970. And we didn't break up. It wasn't like a breakup, like, I don't want to play music with you anymore. But it's just, it was a college band. And we left college, and that was that. And then, so then I spent a year or so, 9 months or whatever, working at Jerry's studio and playing in bands. I played in a number of bands there. That's the first time then that I started playing in other people's bands.
And you were playing rock music or blues, rock, what?
Blues and rock.
Okay.
But basically rock covers. They were mainly cover bands.
Okay. Well, like what kind of stuff? Like Cream and things like that?
Yes.
Beatles, whatever, Stones?
Yes.
Whatever was popular at the time.
That's right. Bar bands.
Bar bands,
well, some of them were better than bar bands, but when I was playing with them, they were playing in bars. And I won't say better than bar bands. Some bar bands are excellent. But anyway, so it was interesting because I was getting this education at Jerry's studio, which was Golden Voice was the name of the studio. And I was working in a lumber mill to pay the bills and trying not to cut my fingers off because I was
Okay.
running the crosscut saw.
Yeah.
So after that, I moved back to New Jersey and moved in with a bunch of old friends, from the neighborhood, all about the same age. And we rented, I don't know if you know where Cresskill is. It's above Englewood in New
Yeah,
Jersey.
yeah.
We rented an old Victorian mansion. It was pretty run down. But it was on about 5 or 6 acres of property, and it was in just above the Teaneck area, and so a motorcycle gang had lived there just previous to that. So a lot of the windows were painted black, and and it was, it wasn't falling apart, but it was kind of a mess. So we rented it, and it had a carriage house out and back, and it was right around the time when quadraphonic was, supposed to be the next big thing.
Yeah.
Which it never really became,
Right. No,
But what the industry had done, particularly TIAC and Sony, something, they took their 1/4-inch tape machines and built a head instead of just recording on track 1 and 3 and then flipping the tape over and recording the other way on 2 and 4. They built a head with 4 channels on it.
Yeah.
I actually built a 4-track machine before that. I took a regular little old cheap, inexpensive bottom of the line Sony 1/4-inch tape recorder that had a head that only recorded on 1 and 3.
Okay.
I had 2 of them, bolted them side by side, took the head on one of them and turned it over.
Okay.
All right. Oh, and it also didn't even have a separate record and playback head. It just used one head automatically. So you were always in sync.
Yeah.
And it had individual left and right record buttons. I don't know why, because I'm sure they never envisioned anybody would be doing multi-track recording. But anyway, and I had it so that the tape would run off one machine onto the other machine, and I used the capstan on the right-hand machine to pull the tape through, and it didn't have too much resistance. It worked. The only problem was you couldn't edit because your programs were like 1.5 foot apart. But I had a working 4-track recorder with 4 individual record buttons.
Okay.
And it worked. It's 7.5 IPS 1/4-inch tape. Boom, it worked. So I actually started around that time with a few bands, just in a garage, recording them on
bringing
my
them
little
in
4-track recorder. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Getting back to this Cresskill, New Jersey thing. So there was a carriage house out in back that they had an apartment above, and one of our friends was actually married at that time, and he and his wife took the apartment upstairs, and downstairs was just it was an old barn, and so at the same time somebody turned me on to the fact that TIAC, and I guess Sony as well, but the TIAC was the one that I was focused on, had taken a quadraphonic 4-track recorder with a head stack that did 4 channels.
Yep.
I guess they must have been overstocked or something. That's my theory anyway, with a whole bunch of machines that they couldn't sell. And somebody had the brilliant idea, all we have to do is put a little switch on top and we can use it, because you could use it as a record head or a playback head. But they said, we can just separate it so you can do them individually. And you're already on the same head, so you're in sync.
Yeah.
So it was a 4-track recorder. So I bought one, a proper 4-track recorder.
Okay.
So I went out and bought one and built a little studio. Oh, and also somebody else turned me on to some genius who was able to put in a double-sized capstan
Okay.
and some modification on the electronics so you could record at 15 IPS.
Wow.
It only had 7-inch reels on it, so you didn't get a whole lot of time.
No.
But it was 15 IPS, so you had a little better resolution, audio-wise.
So you have a little studio there.
So yeah. So I built a studio. I soundproofed the thing. I put in a wall with double glass and the whole works. And I forget what kind of, I guess it was a Sony stereo recorder. And I could mix down to that on 2 tracks.
And what, you had a few microphones? And
Yeah. Sure, 58s and 57s.
Yeah.
Nothing, really
Nothing
fancy.
fancy.
But it's funny when you see any videos, especially from years ago, of anybody playing live, whether it's the Everly Brothers or whoever, 58s.
That's right.
SM 58s.
Yeah.
And they're still
today.
I still use them.
Well, there you go.
There you go. Yeah, so I had mics, nothing, super fancy. I had a mixer I bought from Jerry at Golden Voice, which was it was a professional mixer. I forget the name, a Pultec maybe or something. And it had 4 big knobs on it, and that was it, no EQ,
Okay.
mono output, but it was good quality, Sometimes I'd go directly into the machine and use the mic preamp on the machine, but I must have had some mic preamps that I could use as well. But anyway, I could mix down to a track or 2, usually 1, on my, I guess it would have to be 1, on my 2-track recorder, put that tape back. That was only be 7.5, so I had to work in 7.5 for that. But I put that back on the 4-track, and I had 3 more tracks.
Wow.
Yeah. So now I'm up to 7, And so I started recording in this little studio. I had no EQ. I know what my mic thing was. It was a little Shure vocal EQ.
Yeah.
Just a little cheap
Yeah.
band EQ.
So you'd bring bands in and record them that way?
So I brought in other musicians I knew because and also about that same time, Norm Zeller, the guitarist. Not long after I moved in and got settled in, and I guess I was in the process of building a studio, or maybe I had already finished it anyway. But he moved east. He moved into the same house. Somebody else moved out, and he moved in and took a room. And he and I worked for a number of years as a duo.
Okay.
And I played bass, he played guitar, I sang, and my right foot was the rhythm section. I played a hi-hat.
Okay.
And I was really good at going, And so there I am playing bass and doing that. I occasionally used a Wurlitzer electric piano for doing things like You Are the Sunshine of My Life or whatever. But mainly it was bass and Norm on guitar. And we were pretty good. So we played a lot of bars around that area. And that was our 5-day-a-week or whatever, 6-day-a-week gig at night, And we did that for a number of years. So anyway, I met a lot of other musicians, and so yes, I'd bring in other bands, and I do it for free, and they were delighted, and and it sounded pretty good, if I have to say so myself. And then eventually I got some EQs, but not at the beginning. It was really a good way to learn mic placement,
Right.
and getting the sound out of the amp.
Yeah.
The sound. Using the amp to get the sound, it sounded the way I wanted out of the
Those
speakers.
limitations
That's
made you a good engineer with that.
Absolutely. I learned so much about mic placement during that. And my mom had a Steinway upright piano since, that's what I played when I was in grade school and I took lessons on and everything. So I inherited that. I mean, she didn't die, but, she gave me the piano. And so I put that in the studio as well. So I had a Steinway piano in my studio.
Nice.
And it was really cool. It was a nice little studio. And at some point I'll play you some things that I recorded there, which I'm still very proud of and still sound really good. I'd put them, I want to do a little compilation record of my own recording someday.
So Andy, how did you get from did you have a commercial studio anywhere after this? Did you?
Yes, indeed.
So when would that have been? Like the mid 70s or so?
Yes, early 70s. What happened is I only had this little studio in Cresskill for a few years. I only lived there maybe from 1970 to at most 73. And but some of the demos I did got me a record deal with ABC Paramount Records.
Okay.
And the producer was James Fleming, who did the early Metallica records.
Okay.
Actually.
Yeah.
He had come to this bar in Cresskill that Norm and I were playing at, and he came up and talked to me. He said, "Do you have any recordings of your music and everything?" I said, "Oh, do I ever?" So I laid it on him, and I'll be damned, he got me a deal. It never came to fruition as a releasable record, but it did get me to move out to California.
Okay.
They gave me a budget to do an artist development thing, and I recorded at Haji Studio, which was Alex Kazanagras. I don't know if you remember his name, but he did a lot of the Poco records and all this sort of thing. And his studio was, I'm drawing a blank, doesn't really matter. But that was a 16-track studio, so now I'm moving up, So I was in there. Norm was with me on that. Norm was involved with the project because he played on most of these things that I had done on my own in that little studio. And so he moved out to California. He didn't move out there initially. I did a few recordings with some other players that James Fleming had.
Now, are you
had lined
running
up.
the gear, or are you being recorded?
No.
You're being recorded, right?
Yes, yeah. No, I had nothing to do with the.
But you're in a you're in studios.
But I'm in a
proper studio.
Proper studio, 16 track.
Yep.
This fella Alex was an excellent engineer and a mixer in his own right. And I didn't really even consider mixing a career at that point. I was just glad to have a record deal.
I mean, was mixing really a career even then?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think probably
most of the time
most of the engineers mixed with the producer.
Record. Yes,
and the
right.
producer was there. Do this, do that, and the engineer did it.
Yeah.
And in my case, I can't think of any example of a record I produced that I didn't engineer and mix. There might be something out there, but I can't think of any. So I'm old school in that respect. But there I was basically just an artist and songwriter. And I played, some electric guitar occasionally, rhythm guitar, no fancy leads. I mean, with Norm there. But mainly bass and keyboards and vocals, and they were my songs. So while I was there, I met a lot of other musicians, and it was an interesting time in the early 70s because it was all, like Joni Mitchell and Crosby, Stills and Nash and all this sort of thing. And
would you go out and see any of them play?
No, I never did. I never got to see Crosby, Stills and Nash. I'm trying to think if I ever saw Joni Mitchell. I think I saw Joni Mitchell at a festival somewhere. I know I saw Joan Baez at Newport Folk Festival.
Okay. So
the record deal kind of fell apart. I'm not sure exactly why. But I had met a lot of other musicians out there, and I played with a number of bands out there. I guess some of it was before Norm moved out there, because I moved out there, I don't know, half a year or something before he did. But then he moved out. So then we played together a lot. But we played with a lot of other musicians, and we played on some of their tracks, other artists and things. And so I started working in these, I guess what you'd call them is B-level studios.
Okay.
They were 8-track still.
Yep.
They were built in, maybe the whole studio was the size of this room, the control room, everything. Basically a storefront.
Okay.
They had taken a storefront and built a studio in it. And there was one, again, the name escapes me right now, but there was one that I did a number of recordings in myself. I met them by playing on somebody else's record, and then I said, this is cool and affordable. And it was, a one owner, one engineer guy, and he was very good. Mm-hmm. At least to my ears, he was good, and he was good. So when the deal fell apart and I was no longer recording in this nice 16-track studio, I said, well, we'll do that. So Norm and I did a number of songs that turned out very nicely in this 8-track studio. And then I said, you know what? I built a studio already. I know what I need to do. And at that time, rents in Los Angeles were like dirt cheap.
Okay.
Dirt cheap. Not so in the late 70s. But in like 1972, 73, dirt cheap. So I rented a store that was available on, it was a couple stores a couple doors down from the corner of Pico and La Cienega in Los Angeles. And I had been living in another apartment somewhere in Los Angeles, but I moved to an apartment that was around the corner from the studio, so it was nearby.
Did you build like a little control room in there?
Oh, yeah. I built a proper studio.
Okay.
It was really good. The walls were a little not out of balance, but out of square, and done nicely. And
this is stuff that you learned from being in studios.
yeah, and I also learned carpentry, from building the first studio. So I built a studio. It had a raised control room floor.
Floating floor and stuff.
Yeah, I don't know if it was floating, but it was raised.
Raised, okay.
And a nice big window. And it was a proper studio, a drum booth, a nice, well, in anything booth, you could put drums in it or, put a singer in it. Or, it was a booth. And it looked nice. It was a good studio, and it sounded good.
And how would you find people to work with then?
Well, I'd advertise a little bit. And I also used word of mouth at the beginning because by this time I had met a lot of musicians.
You were like a full service place. They'd come in, you'd record them, you'd mix it, and they'd have a finished product.
That's right. And pretty inexpensively. I think I started by selling. Well, what I did, I sold studio time to some people that knew I had an ability in the studio. They had worked with me in another studio, not where I was engineering, but they also heard things that I had recorded in my little studio back in Cresskill. And they knew I had ability. So I was selling studio time for $15 an hour in advance, in bulk. So that's how I raised money.
Nice.
So
That's
I raised
smart.
money. Yeah, to buy. We had nice wood design on the wall, redwood design on the wall, and it was a nice studio. Hit City West is the name of it.
Okay.
My little studio in Cresskill was Hit City East. So that studio, I was involved in that studio through 1979 or so, when I decided to move back to the East Coast, which I can get into later. But as to why I moved and all this sort of thing. Two of the people that invested a pretty substantial amount of initial funds, they were one of them was actually a songwriter, and the other was a great business guy. And they had I guess it was a management company, and they managed a couple local bands and such. So a lot of bands came in from them because they had already bought studio time. And I eventually, over several years, took them on as partners because it really increased. The studio got busy, and I just couldn't do it all.
Yeah.
I needed somebody in the office, with a Rolodex and blah, blah, blah. And one of the guys was perfect for that. And the other guy was very bright and perceptive. He wasn't an engineer, but I was able to train him where he became an engineer.
Okay.
So he became a second engineer. And then we also hired a guy, finally, a third engineer. And we worked around the clock. We basically, the engineers, the three of us worked 8-hour days. So we literally worked around the clock. The only time we were ever down was for maintenance. And I think our rates skyrocketed to like $25 an hour. So it was a good deal, and again, doing so much recording there. And Norm and I did more of our own recording as well.
But you became a really good engineer from
Yes,
this.
that's again where, I got back into the whole engineering thing and was able to learn and explore a whole asset such as an equalizer that I didn't have available to me in the first studio. The studio did well, and we thrived. We didn't have a huge overhead because the rent was so cheap, and we got a 10-year lease.
Okay.
At about, I don't know, $100
Andy,
a
who
month.
would sign a 10-year lease then?
I know.
Did you
Well,
know
it was
that?
Mr. Jerritson was his name.
Okay.
And he was an older gentleman, a nice guy, a sweetheart of a guy, and he just wanted to rent his building. And I don't know, but we signed a 10-year lease for, I think it was like $100 a month or something like that. It did go up $10 a year.
Okay.
So our overhead really wasn't too bad,
Okay, so when I interviewed Rick Rubin,
Yeah.
he said that you guys worked together in the mid '80s, right?
Yes.
And so when did you end up moving back to New York?
Right.
And how did you start getting into that scene? Was there a New York scene did you open up another place in New York then?
No, I've never had a studio since then, although I built one in my house.
Okay.
And it was never a commercial enterprise, but I had a number of bands come down and record down there in the basement of my house. And it's the same thing. I had a double glass window and, live room basically took over the basement. And some of the First Friday stuff on our new album,
Yep.
overdubs were done down in my basement studio as
Okay.
well. But getting back to your question, so over the decade of the 70s, just to back up a little bit, we did some interesting things there. I didn't engineer it, but I think Dwight Yoakam's first album was done in our studio. Wow. I believe that's so. And although I was not involved with it. And then one thing that I was involved with, which was a thrill, was I recorded the Doors in there. It was after Jim Morrison's death. The remaining Doors had poetry tapes that he had.
Oh yeah.
And they set it to music, and it was ultimately released. Although it wasn't all my recordings, but they did all the prep work and everything. And I think some of the recordings did get used. But called American Prayer, I think was the name of the album, if I'm not mistaken. So I got to meet the Doors and work with the Doors for about a week. And it was pretty cool. you know.
I interviewed the two remaining, John and Robbie, and they're hysterically funny.
I'll bet. Yeah, we had a great time that
Yeah.
week, you know. And, you know, even though I wasn't like on their level at all, there was never any, you know, I was never considered anything other than just a partner in what they were doing.
Fast forward to starting to work in New York City. You moved back. Mm-hmm. How did you meet Rick Rubin?
Okay, I wanted to get back to spending more time doing my own music.
Okay.
I liked engineering and mixing, but being the owner of the studio, there was a lot of business involved.
Yeah,
and I wanted
you
to get
didn't
out of
want
that.
that.
So I didn't. I got to the point where I didn't want to own a studio anymore. So I sold my partnership to my other two partners, who went on and continued for a number of years after that with Hit City West. So that was in '79, I think, and I moved back east with my then wife, the one I moved out there with. We got married while we were out there, and had two children. And so we all four of us moved back to New Jersey, and I bought an old house on a lake in just outside the town of Branchville, and it was just a one-story cabin, no insulation or anything like that, but it was solid. It was good, and it had a view of the lake. It was on the other side of the road from the lake, but it had a nice view of the lake, and it was raised up, so it was a nice place. So I bought it and totally renovated. I put a whole second floor on. I brought my carpentry skills out again.
Okay.
And I put a whole second floor on it, you know, built a staircase inside and everything, and made a studio. And the whole living room area was the live room. There was a kitchen that was kind of L-shaped off of that, and I bought some sliding doors, and that became my booth, you know, with the refrigerator and the stove and the sink and everything. But it was big enough that you could fit a whole drum set in there. And then it had a porch and double glass window again and everything. So that was the control room. And I had my board. Because when I sold my studio, I got a 16-track machine and the board that we were using. I can't remember the brand name now, but it wasn't a bad board. It was okay. So I set that up in there, and that became the new Hit City East. And I did a number of bands there. And in the house, you know, I basically changed where all the windows were and everything. Insulated it, put a whole second floor. I didn't do the roof. I don't do roofs. So I hired somebody to do the roof. And so that was done. But anyway, so I worked on that for the better part of a year. And then I said, okay, I got to get back to work, you know, and earn some money. So I started looking around, and I somehow or other, I don't remember how it came about, but I got a gig at a place in East Orange, New Jersey, called Eastern Artist Recording Studio.
Okay.
And a number of records came out of there. And at first, I started by they wanted to have somebody who could teach an audio engineering class there, and so somehow I convinced them that I could teach that, and you know, which actually turned out okay. So I started there, but then in short order, I became, you know, the house engineer. And just a lot of music went through there. But the first big record and my first gold record was Mtume's Juicy Fruit, which I did.
Yeah.
I didn't mix it. I recorded it. And I met a number of people associated with that, some of whom actually recorded up at my house studio, the Lake House studio.
Okay.
Some of the guys in his band had
So
a
you're
little
working
side
in both
band.
places then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, mostly down there.
Okay.
You know, I wasn't doing that much recording up at the house. Arthur Baker. Do you know Arthur Baker, the dance?
Yeah.
Club and dance record guy. Somehow he was looking for a good, inexpensive place to work. And somebody, I can't remember, I guess it was John Roby. Does that name ring a bell? He was also a club
Yeah.
record guy, John
Yeah.
Roby. I guess it was John that came to Eastern Artists first. And, you know, was looking for he must have heard that they did a good job, you know, and it was inexpensive, you know, relative to New York studios. So he came out and did a few records out there. I think one of the DJ Saved My Life, I think, was one of the songs that was in the club record. But anyway, so John and I hit it off nicely. You know, he was real happy with my work. I liked working with him. I enjoyed the music that he was bringing in. And so he was friends with Arthur. And so he suggested to Arthur Baker that he work out there. So he did. So he came out. And so that's how I met Arthur. And then after a while, Arthur built his own studio called Shakedown Sound in mid-Manhattan. I think it was on 37th Street on the west side in the clothing district. And so he asked if I wanted to work there, you know. And I said, yeah, I'll work in a New York studio, you know. And I had a good relationship with Arthur at that time, so I knew it was going to be a good situation. So suddenly, everybody's coming through Arthur's studio because he became very successful as doing these club records, these dance records. And to back up a little bit, one of the reasons I moved east, in addition to the fact that I didn't want to own a studio anymore, was I also was personally doing much more aggressive rock. You know, even in my own music. Not that my music is like Slayer or anything like that, but it was a little more aggressive than what was going on out there. And so I said, well, if I'm going to make a career as a producer, engineer, I want to do it, you know, I don't want to do the soft rock thing, you know, even though nothing against it, it's just not where I wanted to go.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm hearing these club records, these big beat club records and rap music coming out of New York. And I said, well, now that's where it's going.
Yeah.
You know, and also, you know, I was also trying to combine rock elements with R&B elements and such, and getting some static, you know, either way, you know. And, but I'm hearing this stuff, the club records, you know, that's kind of what that is, you know, or at least a lot of it, and also big beat, you know. So I said, that's a better environment for me to work in. And, you know, the East Coast was basically my home anyway. So that's why I moved east. So getting an opportunity to work then at Shakedown Sound, right in the middle of it, was perfect. You know, so I met Shep Pettibone and, oh gosh, I don't know who else. And that's actually how I met my managers, was through Shep, and he had a good friend who was also doing club records. But that fella was managed by Advanced Alternative Media. And so he turned me on to them. And I was one of the first people, certainly with AAM, but I think first...
You've been with them forever.
I've been with them forever. They've been absolutely perfect. And, but they, not right from the bat, obviously. Well, what they did right from the bat was they got my hourly wage up higher. And then at some point, I became one of the first engineers to have royalty participation in these records.
Wow.
That was, the engineers were just getting paid by the hour, you know.
And who came up
staff.
with that idea?
Advanced Alternative Media.
Wow.
And they pulled it off. So
Amazing.
I was then working for royalties, and I was still working at a Shakedown, but independently at that point, you know. I was no longer getting an hourly wage there, but I still worked there quite a bit. And do you know the name of the Little Rascals? Do you know who they are? The Latin Rascals, not Little Rascals.
Oh, no, okay.
The Latin Rascals.
Okay.
Latin Rascals were two Puerto Rican kids. They were like in their teens, you know, 17 or something like that. And their whole thing was editing. They would edit these dance records. So what was happening is people like Shep Pettibone, Arthur, myself, and a couple other people would be having the Latin Rascals. They had their own little room set up that Arthur had built for them, with just two machines, you know, and sound and a lot of wastebaskets, and they'd be in there editing, you know, the type edits, all sorts of stuff. And what would happen is Arthur or whoever would go in and do a remix and just keep running the multi-track over and over and coming up with different passages and this, that, and the other thing. And, you know, he'd end up with 5 reels of, at least, for a song, you know. And they'd roll the multi-tracks into the Rascals room. I remember one time they did actually have like a lift truck rolling tapes into the Rascals room. And these poor guys worked like 18 hours a day, you know, just nonstop. And but they were great guys, and they were really talented. They worked in shifts. They would do tag team. They didn't work together. I don't think they did usually. And but they were really, really good and tireless. They had all that teenage energy, and so they would be editing all these club mixes. So that was kind of interesting. But it was a great environment to be in and work in, and as I said, that's where I met Rick Rubin, and started working with him. And then
Didn't you guys do the Run DMC record there?
I think most of that was done at Soundtrack, if
Okay.
I'm not mistaken. Not Soundtrack, Shakedown. Rick and I did a few records down at Electric Lady as well, and The Cult was one of them. The Cult Electric, I guess it was.
And Slayer, did that come a little bit later then?
Yes, a little bit later. I was involved with like at least 3 or 4 Slayer albums, including producing one of them and co-producing one of them. But always as a mixer. And then, of course, the ones that I was involved with production, I engineered, I believe, as well.
Well, going back to the Run DMC, the Walk This Way. Now,
Right.
did you engineer and mix that?
I did not engineer it, I don't think. I think it was mixing. And then there was the whole Aerosmith thing, which was great to work with Aerosmith as well.
You're working on some of these records. When you get to the Slayer record, this is really aggressive rock.
Yeah.
Growing up playing folk music and doing all this
Yeah.
stuff, and then working on bands like Slayer,
Right.
How do you even know what that's supposed to sound like?
Well, I don't know that I did know what it was supposed to sound like.
Okay.
What I did know is that I was leaning toward doing a little more powerful rock anyway.
Okay.
I don't know if I'd call it aggressive exactly, that I was leaning toward. But, again, that was one of the reasons I wanted to go to the East Coast, because things were just, more in your face and aggressive,
Yeah.
And, of course, Slayer, rang the amusement park bell on aggressive.
exactly.
And I remember hearing it, before I mixed it, and thinking like, holy mackerel, you want aggressive? Here it is, And if I'm not mistaken, I think that first album was only about 20, 25 minutes long. And on the cassette, it was the same album again on the other side of the cassette when you flip the cassette over. I think it was that album.
When you're mixing, what kind of you would be mixing down to half inch
Yeah.
or quarter inch, whatever,
Yeah, half
whatever
inch.
it be.
It was half inch by that time, yeah.
Okay, and how long would it take to mix a record like a Slayer record like that? How many days would you work on it?
It's hard to say exactly, and I can't say I remember that exactly. But typically, I try to do about a mix a day.
Okay.
And I usually, if it's not finished, it's pretty close to finished, based on the artists and producers' input. They might want to listen to it overnight and come back in the morning and say, well, you know what? I want to make some small changes. So sometimes it would spill over into another day, or get recalled several days later in the process, or toward the end of the process. Mm-hmm. So, but generally speaking, operationally, I generally do about a mix a day.
So the Slayer record was a successful record. The Cult Electric was a successful record. So you're starting to have Run DMC. You're starting to work on these records that are really successful,
Mm-hmm.
and then it makes getting the successive things a lot easier.
Yeah, the phone rings a little more
Right.
often, and again, my managers, Mark Bevan and Andy Kipnis at Advanced Alternative Media, they were very aggressive about getting me out there and making sure people knew what I was doing, and that those are the records that were selling, and this sort of thing.
Would they have rough mixes back then?
Yes, sometimes you get a rough mix.
And,
Usually it'd be something
and that's
like
something that you would listen to, right? You kind of get a vibe for it.
I would listen, sure, just to hear the song and to
Yeah.
hear what's going on with the song, and also to get. It really depends on how rough the rough mix is, but if I can, I try to get some sense of where they want to go with it, But at the same time, I try, and I still do this today, I try not to listen to the rough mix or reference mix or whatever you want to call it. I try not to listen to it too much.
Okay.
Because I don't want to get demoitis.
Yes.
And I don't want to start automatically gravitating toward thinking about that's what the mix sounds like. Now I'm just going to polish it, you know. I want to have a fresh take on it sonically,
Yeah.
you know. And so, yeah, sometimes there'd be a thing. But I know what you're talking about. When you first bring it up from a multi-track and start working with it, you know, you really kind of learn what the song's about. And it certainly was, you know, again, with the first Slayer album, it was different, you know, even though I say, I was looking to do more aggressive music, that was like, you know, really aggressive. And I liked it. I thought it was great because it's musical. It's not just, you know, noise, you know, they're a great band, you know. And I recognized that right away. I mean, I said, yeah, this is great, you know. And it was also an opportunity for me to stretch out a little bit in an area that I wanted to go into, but hadn't really traversed that ground too much yet, you know, or at all.
Getting the Nirvana record, 1991. Would that record have been mixed on an SSL?
That was probably an SSL. We mixed it in the Valley. It's interesting how that came about. I don't know the whole background on it, but I had heard that Kurt, I guess, because Butch Vig had mixed
it,
the
yeah.
album. And I've heard the mixes, you know, and they're good. Butch is very talented, you know. But for a number of reasons, I guess, that I never really discussed with anybody, Kurt wanted to have somebody else do a shot at it.
Which is common.
Yeah, yes, it is.
Common
Yes, it
to
is.
have that.
Yep. And I presume it was because he wanted something a little more aggressive. But what I had heard is that he said, "I want that guy that did the Slayer album," and I'll bet that's true. I never discussed it with Kurt, but I had heard that's kind of what brought me into the picture.
This changed the music business,
Oh yeah,
you know, dramatically. I'll play just a little bit of this here.
Sure.
That, you know.
haven't heard it for a while.
When you pull up a multi-track like this, you don't know this song. You hear that vocal. What's the first thing that you pull up on this? You just kind of move the faders up and kind of get an idea for where everything is. You have a track sheet.
Yeah, I'm apt to do that probably a little bit at the beginning, but right away I start working on things that I know where I want them to go. And I don't remember exactly the order here, but typically, and I'll bet it was the case here, once I got a picture of, what's going on, there were a couple things that I knew I wanted in general. I knew I wanted to have the big parts be really big and really aggressive, just in your face.
Yep.
Just punch. And thankfully, the performances were there to do that. I mean,
amazing.
Dave,
yes.
Who played like a madman on this thing. Anyway, and the other thing was I also wanted it unlike a lot of the Slayer things, and I'm not saying anything negative about Slayer, but I wanted to really take advantage of the dynamics.
Yeah.
So when it got, like right in the intro, I wanted it so you hear it and say, oh, wow, that's really cool, and then suddenly boom, 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 and then bam, So in steps, it just, first you get slapped in the face, and then you get shoved, and then you get punched. So so I knew that those were two things I wanted to do. Yeah, and the vocal is sung
Vocal's
really
amazing.
aggressively. Yes.
Oh my God! Did you immediately? Did that hit you?
Oh, yeah,
Wow!
yeah.
What an incredible vocal.
Yes, absolutely. Because again,
All the vocals on
it's
this
dynamic.
record.
The
Yes.
verses, they got a growl to them, but they're they're kind of mysterious almost. And the calm before the storm, if you will. And
Yeah.
then then he hits the chorus. So I knew I wanted to capitalize on all of that. And my guess then, when I actually got down to it, to soloing things and working on them, was I probably started with the drums to just make sure that there was plenty of chunk in the bottom, but a lot of aggressiveness.
Andy, when you mix drums, whatever drums, what's the panning that you like to do? You do audience perspective or you do drummer perspective?
I typically, unless they want to otherwise, do it drummer perspective.
Okay. How hard do you like to have the toms panned and things like that, and the overheads?
It really kind of depends on the part they play in the song.
Okay.
I try not to have overheads if they're isolated. And
Yep.
sometimes the overhead mics are just a stereo recording, and in that case, I want to hear the stereo.
Yeah.
So I might pan it hard left and right. But if they're somewhat, if their cymbals are close mic'd.
Because with a lot of heavier records, they'll have close mic cymbals, and they would have overheads.
But I don't like hearing cymbals where it's like over here and over here. I don't necessarily want it so that your head is right over the drum set.
Right.
Or even in front of the drum set. It's more a perspective in that regard. So, but I do like making things big by putting them in stereo.
Okay.
So it really depends on how close mic they were and this sort of thing. But I don't want them hard left and right, and that's pretty true of the toms as well. Sometimes, again, it depends on the nature of the tune. If the whole idea is to have a drum fill like in a club record that goes like, I'm apt to make that
Right.
a little wider.
Yeah.
But if it's just a matter of Dave, going,
And the hi-hat, how far over is the hi-hat panned?
usually a little left of center.
Okay.
Rarely way over there. Unless it's some special effect I'm going for. But
Kind of like you're sitting behind a drum kit.
yeah, kind of like that, and then back a little bit.
Yeah.
I want the feeling. I want it to feel like you're in the drum kit, but back enough that I can fill it out with the rest of the band as well. Without having it be all drums in your face.
Now, I've heard you talk about things like the crash cymbals or riding up crashes and bringing them the back
Right.
in mixing. When you have a song like this that has, when they're actually, Dave's riding the crash.
Yeah.
And this is a thing that's kind of a thing that Dave would do. It
Yeah.
ups the energy.
Of course.
Would you say that's even heavier than when you have a heavy open hi-hat? Is riding the crash
Yes.
kind of the top, is that 10? And
Yes, I think so. I know what you're getting at,
Yeah.
and yes, I agree. When you're going on a crash cymbal, you're slamming.
Right. That's
You know.
that's kind of the peak
A
of
hi-hat can be aggressive and tight in a kind of almost an R&B type way,
Right.
But if you want beautiful noise,
yeah.
then you're talking about
But that's kind of a thing that Dave did. That was really,
Yes.
that's a real Dave Grohl thing. You have a lot of competing frequencies, especially with heavy music, between the distorted guitars and the
Yes.
crash cymbal. What do you do about that?
Okay. One of the things I'll do is, and there's no absolutes,
Yeah.
with me.
Just in,
But there are patterns
Okay.
that I follow.
Yep.
And when I'm working on an instrument soloed, I'll start by trying to get the instrument to sound as good as I can get it to sound. Meaning that if I want it to be aggressive, I want to make sure there's high end on it.
Yep.
If I want it to be powerful, I want to make sure there's plenty of low end, and also for the musicality of it, I want to hear some of that coming from the mid-range. So I'll work with those areas, sometimes combing through frequencies specifically to see what seems to work best. Sometimes I'll use a broader bandwidth and move that around, whatever. and I'll come up with that where it feels good to me, and then when I listen to it, for instance, let's say I was working with a snare. So then when I get to the point where, I've done the same kind of thing with the kick drum and the overheads and the cymbals and the toms, I'll listen to it with the whole kit. And I may make some variations there because of exactly what you spoke of. There's frequencies that are competing. And then I'll start to change things. And this applies to musical instruments, and it applies to almost all mixes, whether it's an aggressive mix or not. I always liken it to taking a photograph of a group of people, and you want to make sure you don't have a tall guy standing in front of, somebody who's shorter,
right,
but good looking,
right.
And so you want to have them out front, and still have everybody visible. So you have to rearrange things a little bit. And so that applies to the whole frequency range as well, not just level.
And flipping the phase of the overheads, for example, do you experiment with these things as well and say, okay, how does the snare sound if I flip the phase? Does it have the same type of punch?
Right. I do a little bit, but it's not something that is a regular part of my my thing. I'm more apt to do it if I hear something that sounds a little strange when it's in there with the snare, and rather than immediately jumping on EQ to make things work and give space to each individual. If you can sort of feel, actually in your head, you can kind of feel if you're up by the speakers or wearing headphones, that when something's out of phase, you can feel it.
Yeah.
At least I can. And so if something is suspicious like that, then I'll try flipping a phase because they might have been recorded out of phase without that ever not being their intention.
Now, is there anything that you kind of commonly do like that on a drum kit with the overheads? Will you filter the bottom end off it, for example?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how high will you go for something like that? Will you go up into the mid range and the 400s, or you just do it up to?
No, it depends on the cymbal. It really depends on the cymbal.
Yeah.
400 is probably a little high.
Yeah.
Because you're getting into the mid-range there now, So usually it's more, because sometimes, especially ride cymbals, they get into this kind of gong type thing where it's like, and it's not necessarily anything that's important to the music.
Yeah.
But it's something that's getting in the way. So I'll definitely, trim the bass on that.
It's kind of a really specific thing to heavy rock music with that, when you start getting that, things like hi-hats, but really crashing on the riding on the crash cymbal and distorted guitars.
Yeah.
Kind of picking whatever frequencies. And does it help then when you ride these things up and you do it with fader moves more?
It does. It's a combination of things. Initially, when I was saying before, when something's solid, I'll work with it to get it where I feel it sounds the way I like it to sound.
Yeah.
But then when I have it in the context of the rest of the band, I'll go back sometimes and change those things and have them actually, when I solo them, I like them better before I readjusted.
Yeah.
But it still does the job, and it also allows you to see this instrument over here, audio-wise, hear it. So I will make adjustments like that. I try not to go overboard with it, but I do quite a bit of that. That's a big part of the fine tuning I do in the mix, and that applies to all instruments. In all kinds of music. A piano, I'll EQ a piano in a less aggressive song, and get it so the piano sounds wow, it's much better than just a dry recording. I love it. And then in context, I'll change that sometimes and adjust it depending on the part it plays in the mix, okay? And then and maybe a little bit on the other instrument to get those two, like I said, to pose them so you can hear them both the way they should be heard. But then another thing I'm very concerned about is trying to find out who's got the floor at that time. What is really creating the magic where people go like, I love when that guitar comes in, or I love this, I love that, I love the vocal, blah, blah, blah. So part of that process for me is the EQ, but that may change, during the course of the song. So there's two things that I do. One I've been doing forever is riding in different places in the song, riding the thing up. So most obviously is when chorus comes in or something like
Yeah.
that, I'll give it an extra kick.
Will
know.
you give it just like you ride the overheads, or you're saying that you ride everything up a little bit? Will you ever ride the master fader up?
I do ride the master fader sometimes, but I prefer not to do that because there's other things in the mix that I might not want to have come in louder. So the ones I'm more apt to do it with are rhythm guitars and kick drums and featured instruments. Like if there's a big piano thing that's supposed to be happening, I'll bring that up, but I won't leave it up. And it's not up like 10 dB. It's just a sudden boom, and then back down a little bit. And but another thing I'll do sometimes depends on which works better for me. And it's something that used to be harder to do before Pro Tools, but in Pro Tools I'll change the EQ of it for the hit, and then go back to the other EQ. So I'm not bringing up the whole instrument. I'm just bringing up maybe the mid range.
Yeah.
Just hit it so you really
Just on the impacts.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the whole in the high end isn't changing, but suddenly the guitar has a little more in the forefront. Just for the hit, and then slide it back. And also in different parts of the song, I'll ride things up and down.
How do you know, like when Kurt gets to the very end of the song? I'm just going to play
Sure.
the ending.
I'm stupid and contagious. Here we are now, entertainers. I'm a Leonardo, I'm a Beato, I'm a Beato, I'm a Beato. I deny you, 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 I deny you.
So how do you decide where the level, when you have an intense vocal like that, do you want it to be you don't want to be too high above the guitars, right? You want it to
Right.
be, you have to get how do you know where the right spot is?
Well, in that one, that's one of the most interesting lyrics I've ever heard in a chorus.
A denial. I mean,
The whole thing, and it ends with the denial.
Right, the whole,
and my libido, and
Right.
blah blah.
were you thinking like, wow, this is really creative?
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. The whole album is incredible. And but to get back to your question, if I recall correctly, my intention there was to have you. I wanted you to emotionally feel that he was just kind of lost in the milieu of all this noise and just screaming through it and all this sort of thing. But so obviously I didn't want to override the guitars and drums and bass. But what I did is I wanted to make sure you could hear all that crazy lyric.
Yes.
I wanted to make sure you didn't miss what he was saying.
Yeah.
So you weren't just hearing, And so that was kind of the tipping point there, is to get it either with level or EQ to the point where you could understand the lyric, And I, to that end, I have a lot of things I listen. Not just for this reason, but I spend a lot of time listening on different speakers
Okay, so
at different levels.
I had talked to somebody that worked with you. I can't remember where it was. This is years ago, and they said that you listen so quietly. Yes. They were saying, Andy listens so quietly that I'm like, are the speakers on? Can you hear that? No, is that?
That's true.
Okay, so when you're listening that quietly, are you trying to find that intensity even at the quietest level?
Yes. What I'm trying to do is I have to start by saying I also, at the beginning of the mix, listen really loud to the point where I'll say, look, anybody in the room, you don't need to stay in the room right now,
Because you want to make sure it holds together loud
Yes,
and has the power.
I want to make sure it's got the power coming at me. And I listen on different speakers, not, 10 different speaker things, but the two that I listen to mostly, I use the Genelec 1031s, I guess, and then NS10s.
Yep.
And then most of the studios have some kind of set of big speakers, and I'll listen on them. Not so much critically for the mix, but to make sure that it feels good if it's being played on that kind of a system. I occasionally will spend a little bit of time listening on headphones.
Okay.
Not a lot. It's not something I spend a lot of time doing. But now getting back to specifically what you were saying is, so I do listen loud. I try not to listen loud any longer than I have to. Mm-hmm. But I listen at normal level. But I also spend a lot of time listening, especially when I'm not so much when I'm fine tuning the mix, but when I'm critically listening to the fine tuning that I've done. I'll listen at a lot of different levels, but I do spend a lot of time listening very, very, very quietly because I want to know, the analogy I always use is I want to know that not only is my music going to sound good, on big speakers and little speakers and loudspeakers, but even on a blaster that gets tipped over in the sand at the beach. Mm-hmm. I want to know that if you're standing there listening to it, you hear all the important parts, everything that I want you to hear, like I said, whoever has center stage, I want to make sure that comes through. So listening super quietly helps to do that because there's always a certain amount of ambient noise in the room. So this way, there's a lot of random, especially in New York. It's one of the things I like about this studio is it's kind of isolated. There's not a whole lot. Every now and then a motorcycle will go by, and I don't know if you noticed, but there's a railroad train up there. So sometimes a train will go by, but generally speaking, it's pretty peaceful around here. But anyway, I want to bury it in whatever ambient noise there is, an air conditioner or whatever, and again know that I can really say, yeah, that mix rocks. It's really got all the moxie that I wanted it to have. So that's part of the reason I do that.
One of the records that was a big record, first record that you did was the Rage record.
Yeah.
And I want to play a little bit.
Sure. I like the kick drum.
The kick drum to me sounds amazing.
Yeah, I love the kick drum.
It has so much air to it.
Yes,
and
that low end is.
Yeah.
It's
puffy sounding to me. It really makes the speaker jump nicely. There's reverb on the bass in that first part, and it sounds great.
Oh,
right
good,
in that intro part, the mix is so tight too when you listen to it here. And
well, overall, there's not a lot of reverb on the mix.
Right. It's in your
pretty
face,
dry.
But I think it sounds like you just use the reverb on the bass just in that intro section. And you take it away.
Yeah. Very likely. I don't recall exactly. It's been a long time since I've even heard that. In a very long time since I mixed it.
That's a super punchy mix.
Yeah, but it's a real punchy mix.
Yes.
And that's obviously that's what I was going for. And, in my way of thinking, I tend to be a little shy on reverbs.
Yeah.
And I use them selectively.
Yeah.
Like you just said.
Yeah.
And, but when I want it to really sound, unlike, not that I used a lot of reverb on the Nirvana song, but that one, it was about the roar.
Yes.
This one is about the space between the punch.
Yeah.
And so I try to achieve as much of that as possible by keeping the reverb down a little bit. So when something goes silent, it's silent. After a natural, I'll put maybe a little short room on things just so it sounds real. But
okay,
anyway,
so short room. I've read things like PCM 70s or Lexicon 224s or 480Ls. What are the reverbs that you like to use?
Years and years ago, before any of those even existed, there were other alternatives. But I certainly use the 480L a lot.
Okay.
For all different lengths, and typically. I have at my disposal when I start a mix I may want for some special effect a super long reverb, but as far as what I paint the picture with,
Yep.
I usually have something that's about I don't know, maybe a second and a half decay, something that's about less than a second, pretty short, and then maybe something that's like a longer decay, 3 seconds or something like
For
that.
more of a special effect thing, or
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah. And even for sometimes a touch, depending on what
Yeah.
I'm going for. But I use the shorter ones more often and more of it because I sometimes want it to be where you don't even notice it's on there. But when I take it out, or if I take it out, then it starts, that particular instrument, whether it's a snare or something, it starts to sound a little artificial. Like it doesn't exist. Now, sometimes I'll do that for an effect or something, but in a regular rock record like that, I don't want you to feel like it's artificial. I want you to feel like it's the best concert you've ever been to, and you're right in there with it, but not in a big echoey hall,
And delays. What's a like a PCM 42?
PCM 42.
Like that?
A lot of times I'll use that for delays. Yep.
And do you like delays on the voice? And we use delay and reverb on the voice, or what we use the delays for? Like a delay,
especially
throw
on
for
lead
something?
things, lead guitars. Sometimes I'll put
Yeah.
a little slap on it.
Yeah.
Usually not totally dry, with a little reverb in with it, but just so you get this bah, so you get a swell feeling rather than just bah, just to make that thing a little more interesting,
But when you hear this mix, it's real. It's so in your face.
Yeah.
And how much does the compression, the bus compression, make that punchiness? Is the bus compression adding to this? Is there compression on the drum bus that is what's giving that bass drum and the low end that beautiful punch?
I try not to get too carried away with compression.
Yep.
But I do use it not so much for level control or dynamic control even. I'd rather do that with a fader move.
Yep.
But I do use it sometimes to provide a certain color to the instrument.
Tone shaping.
Yes, exactly. And I'll use that rather than EQ to create a certain feeling. And I don't know how to describe it. It's just something that I listen to, And I rarely compress a stereo drum bus.
Okay.
Usually it's the individual instruments.
Yep.
And perhaps different amounts, because again, I'm going for a sound, and the sound that works, if I use compression at all, the sound that works on the snare is not necessarily going to be the sound I want on the kick drum.
Yeah.
And but getting back to the mix, I do usually use a little bit of compression from the board. It's usually the SSL compressor.
Yep.
But somewhat gently, maybe 2 to 3 dB of variation, at the loudest parts.
Do you use the auto release on it, or do you
I
use,
do.
Okay.
I generally use auto release.
4-to-1, something like that, or does that depend?
Usually a little less than that. 2 or 3 to 1, I think, as I recall. I do it by ear, but it usually ends up in that range. Not too extreme, but again, it's enough that if you take it off, you will hear a little difference, a subtle difference.
Yeah.
But I also I understand that any mix that I do, hopefully, will end up on a record and be mastered by a mastering engineer. And I try not to outthink them and do their job. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. What will you print your mix to? How typically, how hot will you print it?
Fairly hot. I don't mind seeing the meters go past 0.
Yeah.
I worked with a reggae band once that they didn't want to see any meters leave pinned.
Right.
If the meter went like
moved off,
it was like, oh, more BS. So and I tried to tell him. I said, well, that's not always a good thing. But anyway, I'm happy. Let me put it this way: I'm happy to have a good mastering engineer, and thankfully, most of the records I've done have been mastered by very good mastering engineers.
No,
and I'd rather give them their space rather than give them something that's already like compressed to the limit, and they can't back that up. They can't lessen it. So I'd rather trust their ears on that rather than me going overboard on it.
One of the things that was interesting, I interviewed Brendan O'Brien, and Brendan, one of the only records that he did not mix, because he's a producer that mixes records, was the second Rage record. And I love the mix on that record. I love the drums on this. Huge, everything.
People come up. Yeah. We gotta turn the bass up on this one. Check it. Since 1516, minds attacked and overseen. Now crawl amidst the ruins of this empty dream. With their borders and boots on top of us. Pulling out on the floor of the toxic metropolis. But how you gonna get what you need to get? The gut eaters, blood drenched, get offensive like tech. The fifth sunsets get back proclaimed. The spirit of Guatemala alive and untamed. Now face the fog, now blasting out.
Andy, on this, I hear all the ghost notes on the kick drum.
Yeah.
That sounds massive.
Yeah,
that sounds massive to you, right?
Yes, it does. I haven't listened to it for a long time, and it sounds great, if I say so myself.
Yeah.
But, what I like about it is, as you said, I was definitely trying to get definition.
Yeah.
So you could hear everything, including the little grace notes.
Yeah.
And, but I also wanted each instrument to sound big, and, so again, it's not swamped in reverb.
Right.
And my first impression listening to it now, when the whole band came in, is it sounded like you were at a concert, like right in front of the stage.
Right.
You're right there. Everything is up close, but it's still, all right there, massive and everything. So that's what I like about that mix.
I'm going to come back to mixing stuff, but I want to talk about Jeff Buckley.
Okay.
The Grace record is one of the most important records of the last 30, 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, tragically, there was really only that record of a completed record. Working with Jeff, I got to see Jeff play. I lived in the East Village before I moved to Atlanta, and I saw Jeff play at Chenet in the early 90s, and just a genius, brilliant guy.
Yep.
When you made that record, what was that process like?
Well, the way I met Jeff in the first place was Steve Berkowitz had, I guess he must have interviewed a number of possible producers and such. And I was on the list, obviously. So I guess it was in his office that he was there, obviously, and Jeff and I met and talked. And right from the very beginning, there was a certain kindred soul feeling, I could just tell, and I think he did too, that we really had a lot of similar mindset about music in general. And, whether it has to do with influences from, previous artists or older previous records by artists, or I don't know, just in general, it felt good, and I know he liked it too. And then the next thing I did was I went down and saw him at Chenet. Mm-hmm. And one thing I remember is when he sang Grace, I remember I was with his manager at the time. I loved his performance anyway. One of the things I loved about his performance when he played solo like that was he was part comedian.
Yes.
But he'd do things like get into a kind of a comic version of a Led Zeppelin song or something like that and be playing it. And then somehow it would kind of morph into, some kind of little improvised instrumental thing or something. And then that would somehow turn into the intro to Hallelujah, and you go like, what? And people, it was literally jaw dropping.
Yeah.
It would start with him telling a funny story or something like that, and then he'd start, strumming along and do something, and he just wove it together seamlessly and brilliantly as a live artist, and it was just him and his electric guitar on stage. I was already very impressed because I hadn't really heard him before that. I'd met him and talked to him, but I hadn't really heard him. And then he went into, kind of seamlessly floated into Grace. And I was just spellbound by Grace. I was just like, wow. And I remember, I looked at his manager and I said, did he write that? Because, he would do covers.
Yeah.
And I said, is that one of his? He said, yeah. I said, oh boy, I can't wait to get in the studio on that one, And he didn't really have the band assembled at that point, and we had a number of discussions, Jeff and I, and also with Steve, about where do we want to go with this album, and I guess they had already decided that I was the guy. We didn't want to totally have a rock record, right out of the box, because he was so popular at Shanae doing his solo thing, and then they had the little Shanae EP.
Yep.
But that was such a big part of his career.
You didn't want to abandon that. You wanted to kind of incorporate that.
Right, but also Jeff and I both felt it should also go beyond that. And he wanted a band and I wanted a band. I said, this a lot of this music can be adapted to a band, And so I said, look, if you want to audition some band members, which is what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
I said, when you've got something assembled that you think is likely the working band, then I want to go into pre-production with you and spend a week or more rehearsing and deciding what songs we're going to do.
Yeah.
And if we want to make some arrangement changes based on the fact that it's a band now, to do that kind of stuff. And he understood where I was coming from on that. So that's exactly what happened. So he got a hold of Mick and Matt, who were both spectacular players.
Yeah.
They were the right guys for the job, And so we were at some rehearsal room in, I think Lower Manhattan someplace. I don't remember where. But so that's exactly what we did. We started working out how the band was going to play these songs, And I mean, I didn't dictate and say, oh, you play this part, you play that part. But I was involved with trimming things and shaping things and such. It was a joint activity. Then we had to decide where to do the recording.
Did you do Bearsville? Is that where you went?
Yes. Jeff wanted to get out of town.
Yeah.
Because he felt there was a lot of distractions for him in town. And because he was a pretty popular guy.
Yeah.
All the girls loved him.
Yep.
And the guys too. Everybody was Jeff's friend, And so he wanted to get out of town and just be able to really focus. So I had done a number of records up at Bearsville, and I was familiar with the studio.
Great studio.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Then another thing was getting a string arranger. Mm-hmm. And because we wanted strings, on some of the songs, Last Goodbye and all this sort of thing. And so that worked out well. We didn't use a big string section. We had.
I want to just break in for a second here.
Sure.
Because a lot of everybody talks about the record, the sound of it, the songs, Jeff's voice, everything. Jeff was an excellent guitarist.
Yes.
And this is a thing that I have a friend that went to GIT with him and said he was an amazing fusion guitar player. And when you hear him play on Hallelujah, for example, the precision of his parts.
Right. That gets underplayed sometimes because his voice was so magical.
Yes.
And so important to the songs. But he gets overlooked sometimes because he is a great guitarist.
Yes.
On a lot of different styles.
Yeah.
And very precise.
Really precise.
Yes.
He's almost like a session guitar player. He's super accurate.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. No, he's, like I said, it tends to get overlooked sometimes that he was an excellent guitarist.
Yeah.
And, I heard that when I heard him play at Shanae. He's a pretty
That
good
was
guitarist.
the thing that when I saw him play at Shanae too, that I was like, man, wow, he's a great player.
Yes, that's right. So we went up to Bearsville, and I think we were up there 2 different periods of time. I think we came back, and then, I don't know, a couple weeks later or something went up again, if I'm not mistaken. And we had the room, and they have a very big live room in the main studio. And we had it set up with some drapes that we could enclose around the drums to get a drier sound occasionally.
Yeah.
But I used the especially on the more open songs, I used the natural acoustics of the room. So we set up, as a trio basically, and recorded. There was no particular big problems recording it because they're all excellent players.
Yeah.
And I got some basic sounds up pretty quickly. It wasn't a tedious process.
Yeah.
But then one of the things we knew we wanted to do is we didn't want to totally leave Sinead behind.
Yeah.
And so what we did was on numerous occasions, usually after dinner, maybe after a glass of wine or something, when we're in more of a pub type mood, I'd have him go out and do a solo set just as if he were in Sinead. And we got people that worked at Bearsville, whether the cleaning crew or, all different people who were delighted, almost like the Tony Bennett thing I described.
Yeah.
So we'd have a number of people
audience.
as an audience, so he could play to an audience. And he was aware of that,
Yeah.
And so he would talk and do his Sinead set thing. And so some of the songs came out of that.
Amazing.
And I think Hallelujah was one of them, if I'm not mistaken.
I want to play, speaking of Last Goodbye.
Yeah, beautiful song. I like the way the acoustics sits
Yes.
in there.
This is our last goodbye. I hate to feel the love between us die, but it's over. Just hear this and then I'll go. You gave me more to live for, more than you'll ever know.
Andy, the ambience on it is beautiful. The beginning ambience is I just love the way it kind of starts out and just creates this.
Yeah, almost kind of ethereal
Yes.
in some respects.
Yeah. When Jeff would do vocal takes like this, would he sing without headphones? Do you remember anything like that?
We did a lot of different things. We experimented with a number of different things. And there may have been times when I did have speakers set up for him. But I think, generally speaking, it was with headphones. But I don't recall in this particular instance if that was it. But I believe some of that ambience at the beginning was the room at Bearsville.
Yeah. I was wondering about that.
Yeah, I think it sounds like that to me, and I'm pretty sure that's what that was. There may have been some additional reverbs here and there.
Now, I've heard you talk about Hallelujah and like I said, with the Mix with the Masters, where you talk about different reverb sizes used.
Mm-hmm.
Do you visualize the space as you're listening to it?
Yeah, I would say I do. I don't usually use like tons of different reverbs. As I spoke of before, there's usually kind of 3 that I have available.
Yeah.
And they may vary, from track to track, but
Yeah.
that's kind of my MO for doing that. I don't remember exactly what reverbs I used on that, other than what it might have been natural ambience. I think most of the vocals, were cut with the drapes away.
Okay.
So you could hear some of the room. I'm pretty sure that's the case. I've done a lot of records up at Bearsville. It's hard to remember which I used the ambience for and which I didn't. But I know we tried to get a lot of natural ambience feeling in a lot of these songs.
When you produce a record like this and then you mix it, does the mixing go really fast because you kind of have the template as you're putting it together?
Yeah, I don't remember this being particularly tedious mixing. But I probably spent a day per song mixing it,
Did you know how important that record was going to be?
In a way, I did. A lot of times it'll happen like that where I don't know that. I'll know it's a good record, but, I won't realize it's going to just be, really important and well loved, But I think with this record, it was just so magical in my estimation. And, now maybe that was just me being a big fan. Oh, it's going to be a huge hit. But I definitely felt that. I felt that way about Nevermind as well.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that particular record. I didn't realize how big it was going to be. I don't think anybody did.
I mean, honestly, it's a record that my 12-year-old daughter listens to, and
Yeah.
all her friends listen to now.
Yeah, it's timeless.
It's timeless.
and so is this.
Yes.
It doesn't feel like that's a real '90s
Yeah.
record. Yeah, I agree.
After Jeff passed, did you do some of the mixes on?
I did. I'll tell you a little bit of the history of that.
Yeah.
He had gone in with Tom Verlaine.
Yep.
I think on a couple different occasions, and I think Jeff and Tom were fine. In fact, Jeff was a big fan of Tom Verlaine from television, and so I'm sure it was Jeff's idea. I don't know the whole backstory on that, but there was something, I think, within the band that there was some, I won't call it friction, but something that was not quite settled or something. I don't even really want to comment on too much because I'm really kind of talking through my head here, through my hat. But I do know that Jeff wanted to redo it.
Okay.
Not just have somebody else mix it, but redo it.
Yeah.
And I think maybe he had changed his mind on some of the songs and such, But he got in touch with me, and he said, he explained, he said, I knew he was in with Tom Verlaine, and that was fine with me.
Yeah.
People have to, take different paths sometimes, and it's good. That mix up can be very good. But so he asked if I was interested in doing another album with him, producing, and same idea. And I said, yeah, definitely. Just we'll set up a time. So he was down in Memphis at the time, and so I went down to Memphis, and I must have spent like 4, 5, 6 days down there reviewing material. He was doing a solo gig, not to get rich, but just to play in front of an audience.
Yeah.
And he hadn't done a solo gig, I don't think, for a long time. So it was refreshing for him.
Yeah.
So I went to hear him there, and then so we talked through a lot of the material, and I listened to a lot of the material, and he had some cassettes, that he had recorded of some of the material that he didn't do live. So we talked it, and we said, okay, the next step is to get the band down here and do pre-production.
Yeah.
So we had a studio all lined up. We also chose a recording studio. It was the something Brothers. Anyway, they had a recording studio. It was kind of a funky studio, but I think we both sort of felt it'd be kind of nice to do it in a funky studio. It was professional.
Yeah.
But it was kind of funky.
Okay.
So we were all set to do it. So we had arranged for the band to come down, and I guess he and his equipment manager were just kind of sitting out along this tributary to the Mississippi. And I think it was the day that the band was supposed to arrive. I think they were kind of waiting for the band to arrive that day, if I'm not mistaken. Don't quote me on this.
Yeah, I think that I've
accuracy of
read that's the case.
I think that's the case.
Yeah.
And the plan was that after we had spent the week, just Jeff and I, talking about pre-production, I went back north. And then the idea was the band was going to come down, and they had a rehearsal space set up, and they were going to spend a couple days just kind of putting their heads together, almost like we did in New York.
Yeah.
And then I was going to come back down and do a full proper album pre-production with them, and then go in to the studio. And everybody knows the story. Then he wasn't drunk, he wasn't stoned. Jeff had a careless side, like somebody who would ride a motorcycle without a helmet or whatever. Not that he was foolish, but he. I don't know how to put it. He was very spontaneous. And obviously he fully dressed, jumped in the river, and was, I guess, playing around. And my understanding is a barge went by and created an undertow.
Yeah.
And it took him away, and they found him days later. So when I got the news, I was devastated. Because Jeff and I got to be pretty good friends.
Sure.
I end up liking a lot of the artists. I mean, personally, liking a lot of the artists that I work with. But Jeff was one of the ones I got to be really, really good friends with. And I was devastated, just, I couldn't believe it at first. I said, no, I can't be, But And sadly, it was true. And the label obviously looked toward Tom Verlaine's recordings and asked if I'd mix it. And I said, yeah, definitely. I don't even need to hear it. I know Tom Verlaine's music and a little bit, and it turned out that I liked the album, So I mixed it, and it got released as My Sweetheart the Drunk.
Yes.
And there's some excellent songs on that album.
One of the songs that I love is Vancouver.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
And
yeah.
I thought that was just an absolute beautiful song. Not only does it have it's got such an interesting drum part, it's got a beautiful, incredibly interesting melody, guitar solo in it. Mm-hmm. That whole record I thought was great. It's great to have something from him.
Yep. And I think that record. Well, first of all, Vancouver. I think they used to use Vancouver as a warm-up tune at sound checks, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, I think that album is overlooked and underrated.
Yeah.
The My Sweetheart the Drunk album.
Yeah.
Because Tom did a really good job of producing it, And like I said, for whatever reason, they wanted to go a different direction with me. When I brought it up and listened to it, I think there were rough mixes that I think were pretty rough, but they were never presented as anything but that, So I didn't really get to dive deep into it until I was actually ready to mix it, starting to mix it. And I think the production was pretty good, Everybody's different. I'm sure it would be different had I had a chance to go in myself and produce it. But it was good. It certainly was not worth burying in the vault someplace. And as you said, unfortunately, that was it. That was the end of the line. So I was very happy to mix it, and I was very pleased with the mixes. And I like the album. I still like it very much.
The tune Vancouver, I'll just play it.
Sounds like a theremin.
That's a theremin, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Andy, the bass on here is so interesting. I've heard you talk about using Dimension D or a SPX 90 or something to give the bass some width, using some...
Very likely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I don't remember exactly, but it sounds like that's probably what it was.
So when you do something like that, would you keep it in stereo and it seems to give it more definition, especially when you have these moving lines like that. It seems to bring it out more.
Right. You're talking about keeping the effect in stereo.
Yeah.
Yeah, almost certainly.
Yeah.
In stereo, yeah.
Something like this, there's only really 3 guitar parts or a couple of guitar parts.
There's
almost nothing
very
to
sparse,
it.
yeah.
So sparse, yet it sounds so full.
Yeah.
It's the parts that he's playing too are so interesting.
Yeah, and complementary.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then the theremin, there's a beautiful guitar solo in the song too. I mean, really interesting.
Yeah.
That sounds amazing.
Oh, well.
On
my behalf, thank you. But Jeff had a little to do with that.
So moving on to a little bit later in the 90s, I want to talk about Linkin Park, because Linkin Park, these tracks on the first 2 records that you mixed are, they have billions of plays. Mm-hmm. And that record, once again, was a very different, really heavy, aggressive guitars, kind of a really unique sounding record.
Yes, yeah. It certainly had a heavy feel. But it also was melodic in a really cool way. It wasn't just, like power pop, not pop, but power, heavy stuff.
Yeah.
The songs were really cool, and they would hold up even in a totally different arrangement. As I recall thinking that.
I want to play a couple
sure,
things.
Sure. I forgot about that.
Andy, there's so many little parts in here, and there's everything is so clear when I listen to that.
Yeah, even the heavy.
Even the heavy guitar parts. It's very well recorded. I'm trying to think of the producer, Don Gilmore.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
To me, in addition to how fat it sounds, it's like everything has its place too. Are these challenging mixes to do when there's all these little kind of parts? Where are these things going to be? What's the level of each instrument going to be?
I don't know if challenging is where the greater challenge for me is to keep, because as I said before, I'm really into definition. I want you to hear all the bits, and I especially want to hear the bits that at any given time are particularly important. The biggest challenge for me in that is the heavy parts.
Yes.
Because there's so much going on.
Yes.
And I want those guitars to sound like you're not hearing anything but the guitar.
Right.
But you are. But I want you to get the feeling that this guitar just came in and, just took over your life. So that's, I find that the most challenging, where I really have to spend a lot of time, tweaking this and tweaking that and, panning and all this sort of thing. As far as the more open parts with the little things that come and go, it's not too bad. I mean, I may experiment around a little bit and play it around. And, I always like to have the artist's input as well.
Yeah.
Because it's their record. I've said this many times. It's their record. It's not my record. And I can mix it on my own and, hopefully it'll sound great and people will love it. But their input is what makes it their record.
Yes.
Obviously their performance, but there's no perfect mix. There's different mixes and there's good mixes, but there's no perfect mix. And so what I consider, the as close as I can get to a perfect mix, that is a mix, and this is so in production as well. I want to, if I want to hear what the last album was and talk to them about the last album, what do you want to do different, blah blah blah. But the same thing in the mixes. So a lot of that, deciding where the little boom boom zip things, where those are going. I like to make sure that the band likes what I'm doing and they don't feel it's turned into a cartoon or something.
So Andy, I'm going to play a song off the next record, Meteora.
This is off Meteora.
Yeah, it's off the next record.
Oh, okay.
Tired of being what you want me to be, feeling so faithless, lost under the surface. Don't know what you're expecting of me, put under the pressure of walking in your shoes. Caught in the undertow, just caught in the undertow. Every step that I take is another mistake to you. Caught in the undertow, just caught in the undertow. I've become so numb, I can't feel you there. Become so tired, so much more aware. I'm becoming this. All I want to do is be more like me and be less like you. Can't you see that you're smothering me?
This record is mixed so well. I mean,
you.
everything about it. When they go into the chorus here, and they do this on the songs with these heavy guitars, on this record even more, they just do the held chords. And it seems to give so much more clarity with that chord holding as opposed to kind of strumming along. What do you think about that?
I always think of it as making a statement, like, dong,
Right.
and you're going to listen to this for a minute,
Yeah.
as opposed to a rhythm, I mean, there's place in music for all of it, but that's what I always consider about that one. They just go dong and let it sustain,
You can hear the groove clearer when they're not kind of re-articulating
Right. The rhythm, the rhythmic part of it isn't too busy.
Yeah.
And yet it's still big.
One of the songs that on here that to me is one of my favorite mixes of yours is this one here. I love the punchiness of the kick drum and the bass together and how heavy the choruses are.
Yeah, I like those guitars too.
If I could stand up and take the blame, I would. If I could take all the shame to the grave, I would. If I could change, I would. Take back the pain, I would. Retrace every wrong move that I made, I would. If I could stand up and take the blame, I would. I would take all my shame to the grave. It's easier to run, replacing this pain with something more. It's so much easier to go than face all this pain. You're all alone. When it that's just that's like a
I've enjoyed it.
perfect mix.
Yeah.
Dum, dum, dum. It's almost like the bass drum and the bass are so perfectly merged. I mean, they're so tightly played. It's almost like it's just like at one instrument.
Yeah. Well, one thing, and I don't take credit for it, is it's a beautiful arrangement.
Beautiful arrangement.
Just
yes,
really, really great. And the whole thing, the heavy part and the quiet parts. And I remember, I wouldn't have remembered had you not played it for me here, but in the vocal, it is there before the rap, the melodic vocal.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting because when you were talking before about delays and reverb, there's hardly any reverb on it, but there's a subtle, long delay that just provides some kind of interesting da 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 da,
Yeah.
But if any reverb, it was very, very small amount because I wanted that dry feeling, that in your face feeling. But I just thought it would be kind of cool to have, some kind of freaky sound.
I love how they use octaves in the choruses of these. Then I think you put that up the middle, an octave guitar that gives it more harmony even with the heavy guitars there. But the really aggressive guitars, I call them almost like buzzsaw guitars, like square wave guitars.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that a good description?
Yeah,
of
it is because
it's fuzz.
They don't really
fuzz.
They don't really decay. It just goes.
Yeah, and it's more. To me, they sound more fuzz and square wave, and it makes it sound so aggressive.
Yes.
Okay, I want to jump to a couple more things. I'm not going to keep you here forever, Andy.
That's okay. I'm having a good time.
Another one of my records that I love the sound of is the Perfect Circle. A Perfect Circle, the 13th Step record. This is also one of my favorite songs. I'll just play it.
Sure.
Weak and Powerless.
Tilling my own grave to keep me level. Jam another dragon down the hole. Digging to the rhythm and the echo of a solitary silent one that pushes me along and leaves me so Someone feed the monkey while I dig in search of China white as Dracula as I approach the bottom. That's the
Okay, that is
Great to hear that again.
That is a beautiful song. I've interviewed Maynard, I've interviewed Josh Freese, I've interviewed Billy, all separately.
You've interviewed everybody, haven't you?
That's one of my. First of all, it's one of my favorite drum parts because it's so strange.
Right. What I was going to say, I don't mean to interrupt, but there's a particularly high amount of, a large amount of high end on the kick drum. And the reason is because it's such an interesting pattern.
Yes.
It really, for me, sets the whole rhythm section up. It's not just, the kick drum with some top end on it. It's almost like somebody was playing a woodblock or something, a rhythmic pattern.
Yeah.
And to me, that really, it's a little more. That's one of those instances where if I were just soloing that kick drum,
Yeah.
I would say, oh no, that's too much high end. I like high end on kick drum, but that's too much. But in the context, it really does something.
When you heard that groove, were you thinking like, wow, that is cool?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is. It's a very cool groove. It's great to hear it again. I haven't heard it for a while.
Maynard's vocal, the way that you treat his vocal on this, really the entire record, I love whatever you do to his vocal, how you sit it in the mix. Mm-hmm. And Maynard's such a great singer, but the way that it's placed in there is just, to me, is just so beautiful.
Yeah. Well, I don't have any specific thing to say, oh, I did that by doing this, But I do know that one of the things that allows it to feel like that is making sure that there's room for it without turning the instruments down.
Right.
So again, that's the kind of thing where I probably on that kick drum maybe took out some of the mid-range that I wouldn't ordinarily take out. But it's open enough that you still feel the low end of it. It still works as the kick drum. So I probably did something similar with the guitars when the vocal was in to kind of make a little extra room for it without having it be way up in front of the mix, But other than that, I don't know. It sounded to me like I might have used just a tiny touch of a chorus effect on it, which not so much to make it sound chorusy, but to give it a little edge.
Yeah. For some people watching this and they look at you, and this is not anything, but when I look at you, or when I first saw you, and I was like, that's
What?
Andy Wallace? Come on, there has to be some people that...
Oh, yes, that's I've encountered that quite a bit.
Before the internet, before people regularly saw stuff, did anyone come in and say, wait, you're Andy Wallace?
Yes. Sometimes out of the blue, I'd be checking into a hotel or something like that. And, in the check-in, the person, usually a younger person behind the counter says, Andy Wallace? And then they look at me and, you do records? And I know what they're thinking. Like, they think, an old fart like you is doing, these heavy records, And I just say, yeah, well, I am. As you know, I'm a big car fan. And I've worked a lot in England, so I've made a lot of good friends over there and such. And we joined a car club. My wife and I joined a car club, a touring car club over there. We signed up to do a tour around, I forget whether that particular tour was to tour around France or England, and it doesn't really matter. But in any event, so they sent out a description to all the participants, including a list of who was going to be on the tour. Mm-hmm. So, Andy Wallace was on the list. And when I got there, it turns out there's a very famous race car driver named Andy Wallace.
Yeah.
And I didn't know most of the people that were on the tour. I knew a couple of my friends that were on the tour. But so I'm meeting everybody. And, at the beginning, you have a little welcoming dinner and everybody says hi and, meet and greet type thing. And I consistently got, you're Andy Wallace? And I wasn't aware that there was a race car driver.
Yes.
So then
This is like the opposite effect of
exactly.
it.
It's just the negative, the reversal of it. And somebody finally told me that, that he was a famous race car driver. So I said, everybody thought the race car driver was going to be on the tour, and they were kind of let down. It's like it wasn't just incredibility. It was like, you're Andy Wallace? I thought you were the Andy Wallace. And I'm saying, well, in some places, I am the Andy Wallace, And so, anyway, it all sort of, we all had a good laugh about it, but it was really funny because it was several of the "You're Andy Wallace" things into the evening before I became aware of the race car driver. So anyway,
oh my God!
So exactly, it's just the opposite of the usual. So I got it both ways.
So I have this term that I use for you, aesthetic aptitude. That it's like, what's cool, doesn't matter what age you are, like you just know how to place this stuff, put this stuff together. Is it balance? Is it tone? I mean, it's all these
It's
things.
all of that, yeah. And instinct, you know.
Instinct.
I can't really put a name on it other than that, you know, because it's the same thing that happens in anything that I mix or produce, you know, whether it's Jeff Buckley or, you know, Slayer, you know. It's the same mindset is happening, just with different tools, you know, and sometimes a different objective. It's just something I feel I'm very blessed that I have, and also I feel very fortunate that I've been able to use it to make a living, you know.
Another record that's incredibly heavy that you did was the Chevelle record that has this on it.
What a tone.
Okay, so Andy, once again, those guitars are so heavy.
They are heavy.
That's like a fuzz. Once again, that's a fuzz or buzzsaw
Yeah,
sounding
yes.
guitar.
Yeah.
Describe, if you can, difference between distorted guitars and fuzz guitars. There is a difference between
Well,
that because this is extra heavy, kind of like Linkin Park in a way.
Yeah. I don't know that I can give any definition about the difference.
If you listen to Angus Young and then compare it to that,
Yes.
this is more fuzz, right?
Yes, yeah. And a fuzz is just an element of distortion.
Yeah.
You know, there's no, you push the distortion button on the amp and you get this certain sound that everybody else gets. It has to do with, what amp you're using, how it's mic'd, what mics you're using, and how much you're overdriving the amplifiers. I don't know how to describe it except that I think a part of that buzzsaw sound is the lack of decay.
Yeah.
So it's overdriven so much that even as the string of the guitar settles down a little bit,
it's a square wave.
It's still,
it's like a square
you're
wave.
still overloading the amp, and you're only going to get so much gain out of it.
Yeah.
And so the tone of the fuzz may change, as it progresses, but the level doesn't.
I love when it's in there, how it just sounds like a big ball of sound, like a beautiful ball of sound.
Yeah.
Do you kind of think of things in that way too, or
I do have a certain visual feeling about it.
are you as it's playing though? You're rocking out to this, right?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's great to hear. These speakers sound really nice too.
There's so many other records that I wanted to play. I'm going to play one other thing that you did.
Okay.
Yes, this is the campaign slithered in jails in the cargo bay. A new turd is the vastness, hollow vacuum, choppy oxygen tanks. They hibernate, but how they kiss the ground, pucker up and kiss the asphalt now. Tease this, amputations, splintered larynx, shit has access now. Get away, send transmission to the water system. Get away, send transmission from the water system. Get away,
visceral.
A big part of it is the arrangement, and I got to give it to the band and producer on that. you
Yeah.
know, because it's not just heavy. It's this really interesting arrangement. And one of the things I love on this is in the chorus that
Yes.
there's complete silence in
Yes.
between. There's nothing hanging over, no ambience or anything like that. And it was particularly noticeable even before the vocal came in. It just and it just gives it such a punchy effect.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a couple of questions I ask everybody. Andy, what is a perfect song to you? Like it doesn't matter who the artist is. Like, what is a perfect song?
Jeez, really hard for me to say, but I can tell you one song that really stays in my head and I really like is a Space Hog song called "Sand in Your Eyes," and I just think it's just such a brilliant song. And I like the way it feels, and I like the way he sings it
Yeah.
and everything. And it's just a cool song, and the whole concept of it lyrically is very different, and it's just interesting. I like things that are that sound different and have a certain unique, almost kind of sometimes twisted vibe to them.
How do you know when a song is done? That's the other thing that I like to ask people that are producers.
Mixing or
and mixers.
producing or.
Either way.
Either one. That's a hard thing to answer too. But I guess when you sort of feel, well, two things is you go into it, and while you're doing it, and to some degree, even before you start, when you are doing pre-production or something like that, you have a basic concept, however ethereal it might be, of what you want that song to be. Maybe even some reference song, like I want it to sound like Led Zeppelin's, this, that, or the other thing, have that vibe. So you kind of know when you caught that vibe, in it. And then the other thing is when you don't feel that it's lacking, and there's always a temptation to put too much on it, and then it gets distracting. So you have to, that's something I think you learn with experience, is when to say, that's enough. It's certainly possible to add more things that are really cool, but you can't have everything in there at once, or you lose the special, unique quality that you're looking for, because you want that song to stand out and be unique. That's one of the things I like about the Sand in Your Eyes. I can't think of any other song I would say that, well, that sounds like this song, or it reminds me of this song. It doesn't remind me of anything. It reminds me of that song.
Well, Andy,
All right.
I appreciate you spending the time with me today, and you're a legend. It's
well, thank you. But
really appreciate it.
Okay, well, I appreciate it too, and it's been an absolute pleasure. First of all, just meeting you in person, but also spending having the opportunity to spend all this time with you, and hopefully answering questions in a reasonable fashion.
Absolutely.
So, okay,
Absolutely.
well, it's been great. So, thank you.
Thanks, Andy.
Okay, very much. You take care.
You too.